On this episode, we are going to dive into the weird wilderness of Wisconsin. I have a very special guest on the show. Her name is Blair. She's going to be sharing with us some truly weird encounters, everything from strange cryptid encounters to shadow people to otherworldly sounds that can't be explained. This episode is going to get really weird, so stick around. It's great to have you.
Thank you.
From listening to you on America's Scaryland, I know that you have some interesting stories to share. And really, this episode is all about haunted grounds. The story that I'm going to share with you later, my listeners have probably already heard. So I thought I might start with you. So that way, when we get to me, they can just bow out of the episode or... and then, so I want to hear all your crazy stories.
Well, thank you. Yeah, some of the things that have happened are still they're hard to wrap the head around for sure. A lot of this has happened to not just me, but a chunk of my dad's side of the family. So where to start with this was my step-grandpa owns land in Durand, Wisconsin. For reference, if you know where Minneapolis is, it's roughly an hour and a half drive from Minneapolis into Wisconsin. And I don't remember when he bought the land, but he has had it for at least 4 decades. And he uses it for hunting. And it's literally between like 2 or 3 cornfields. It's the only unkept land that there is. And it's all wooded. He hasn't really done anything to it. He never built a house or anything on it. He has a camper and a fire pit and a picnic table, and that is really it. So when you drive in, it's on a county road, and it's right off of the county road into a patch of trees. And when you come into this thing, you can see the mound right away. And we've always known that in Indian burial mound. We know that there is something in the mound because when I was super young, they made this discovery during the day when somebody was hunting. On one side of the mound towards the top, there's this little opening. And it's like a sandstone type rock. And all of these carvings, like etchings of pictures on the walls, but we can't really make out what it is because the only reason why we could tell is the sun was hitting it just right. Opening, it's really weird. The opening is not that wide. We can't really make out what it is. And I would love to, get some pictures and do some research on that. It's really hard to get out there without my grandpa and my step uncles. So, and I'll try to do this in chronological order because I found things out a couple years ago from my brother that I didn't know that makes this a lot creepier.
Okay. Yeah.
So back in the 80s, when my dad and my step aunts and uncles were in high school, they used to party on the land. They bring their friends out. Yeah.
Sounds like typical Midwest to me.
Definitely. There wasn't drinking at all, I promise. No. There's loud music and everything. And of course, teenagers and partying, it's going to be a little noisy. Well, back in that day, of course, they used antennas to get a reception on the big boombox. Well, they were just listening to music, partying, and all of a sudden, the signal completely fizzled out. So they're like, oh, crap, So they went and fixed the antenna, and it worked for a little bit, but all of a sudden, it went out completely, and then you heard this growling noise come through it. And at first, this is a really bad connection. So somebody went over to fix the antenna and started yelling because the growling was coming through the speakers, but it was also coming up from the trees. And there were several people that saw this pair of big red eyes that were like 3 feet apart from each other.
Oh no, that's way too big.
Yeah. And they could tell the growling was coming from there. So everybody left after that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And after that, there are a couple of my step aunts and uncles that refuse to go out there till this day, even from having that party back in the 80s. They just do not want to go out there. And they said that they feel really weird out there.
Yeah. I would not blame them for that. So does anybody have any thoughts of what it was maybe that they saw before you continue on? Like, does anybody have any like speculation?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I asked that growing up because that was really the only story my dad told me for a long time. And he said that a lot of people just kind of deny it. And a lot of people are just like, we were drinking. It could have been anything. It could have been a raccoon. And we just thought that, and they're like, well, raccoons don't growl like that. Oh, it could have been a bobcat or a cougar. We have that in the area as well. So not a lot of people want to really think about it. It's very much this happened. Mm-hmm. I don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
I don't want to talk about it. Yeah. My dad still goes on the land. He's never been deterred by anything, and he's had a lot of experiences. He has shared some, which I'll share with you, but he hasn't shared all of the stories with me. There's some things that he doesn't even want to talk about. My dad is a big, burly, like 6'4" guy who's like, I'm not afraid of anything, pretty serious guy. So when he says like that, that's kind of, that freaks me out. So to kind of go off of that, since then, since that party, my dad has had experiences driving on that county road, just passing the land. He's seen this, how he describes it is a mountain lion that's completely gray, and you can't really tell if it's fur or what, because the hair on it is really short. But he said it was like a mountain lion running across the road from the land into the cornfield across the way on its legs like a human.
Oh no.
Yeah. And he's seen this a few times. And it's not just at night, it's also during the day. My mom can attest to that. I guess once when I was younger, I was in the back seat in a car seat, and they were just driving home. But they weren't even out at the land. They were driving from my grandparents back home. And during the day, it ran out from the woods and into the cornfield again. Same thing. They can't really figure out like how tall they would say it was, because with driving and the distance it was away from the vehicle, my dad says it's probably between 6 to 7 feet tall, very muscular. But yeah, he said it's never usually on all fours when it's running. So that's kind of weird.
Would that be something that would fit into like the category of like a dogman, or something that really doesn't have a classification?
Right. I would say based on stories that I've heard about the dogman, potentially, yes. I think that could definitely fit in that realm of story, because, you do hear a lot of times, oh, it's covered in hair. It runs across the road when it's been seen like a human, red eyes. As far as hair wise, I know I've heard like some stories say that dogman has really shaggy hair like a wolf. In other stories I have heard that the hair is pretty short and close to the skin. So I could definitely put that in that category for sure.
There are supposed to be different variants. So it's interesting. In the color that you mentioned, I don't think I've ever heard anybody describe that before. So
yeah. Well, and then it makes you wonder because, I could see it at night. It's really hard to tell what color anything is. And my dad really didn't know, or he really could distinct what color it was until he saw it during the day. So, and that the first time he saw it though was at night. So he was just like, I thought I know, maybe I'm tired, but he knew it was the land. So he's like, oh, all right, we're just not going to talk about it. My aunt, so in that cornfield that's right across from the land, when my aunt was younger, she did see something in the cornfield that was facing the land, and it was staring at her. She wasn't really paying attention to anything. She just kind of felt like something was looking at her. And so she looked into the tree line across the road into the cornfield. And how she described it was, okay, when you were a kid, did you ever play the ants in the pants game?
I vaguely remember the game. Yeah.
Yeah, like the little ant legs and stuff. She couldn't make out if it was like antennas or if it was horns or ears or something, but they were really long and pointy. But she said that it reminded her of what the ants were shaped like in the ants in the pants game, and it was very tall and black, and it had red eyes.
That's so scary. That sounds almost like what is it, the wendigo? Like, don't they normally have horns? Wisconsin is weird. How do you live there?
You know, sometimes it's just too weird for me too. It's a weird and the fact that, my family has this land, that's pretty awesome. Don't want to really ever go camping. Because a lot of people, so my grandpa has that camper, and anytime anybody would camp on the land for like hunting or anything like that, they would always stay in the camper. No one ever stayed in a tent.
So you can literally park the camper in a parking lot somewhere like next to a Walmart and to be the same experience.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, we're not going to tent here. And which my dad, he doesn't care out there, so he will stay in a tent, which that kind of leads into where I had my experience. But I'll tell that one in a second, because another thing to know is my dad has seen shadow figures out there. He's heard noises. He's seen things. One time when he was hunting, he saw this black dog, and he said that it was larger than a normal sized large breed, but he couldn't really distinct what breed it was. And he knew that the farmers in the area, they didn't have a dog like that. So he's like, I don't know what this is. And he kind of walked around a little bit because it was kind of where his hunting spot was. So the dog followed him for a while. And at one point he went to go find my step grandpa to kind of be like, hey, do you know whose dog this is? And at one point he turned around and the dog was completely gone.
So did he say that, it legitimately looked like it had form and shape, like it was a solid, like it could have been the neighbor's dog kind of thing? Or
yeah,
okay,
he said definitely solid. I don't know for sure if it made noise or left tracks on the path at all. I don't know that, but he said it was completely solid, like it was a real dog. But he said, I don't know what kind of breed it was. It's not like a dog that I've ever seen. But he said, yeah.
I'm laughing because you're gonna lose your shit when you hear my story later.
Oh, I can't wait to hear it, especially since I know we kind of chatted about that you have stuff on the land where you live, and I'm very curious because when you go to research this stuff, you're like, you find certain things, but it's not quite how you just want to know.
Mm-hmm.
And it's quite right.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to know too, because the history, like we'll get into it a little bit later, but we don't know the full history. Like the states that we live in, were occupied by native cultures, and they were forced out, and some of them came back. And then, so yeah, I'm sure that like the actual truth of who was there and who was where, like it would be really hard to track that information down. But
absolutely. And I have tried. And of course, you get kind of that textbook description, but it's very vague. So, and I've tried to look up symbols of sorts, based on stories that I've heard and, visions that appear. and it's so hard to track it down. I know that the Ojibwa were in that area at one point, but point were they really prominent in the area enough to have the mound there at that point? You don't know. And of course, because there's the mound there, what's to say that the farmers that own the land around it, when they completely prep their fields for crops, what do they find in their area? Do they have stuff that they see or witness in their houses or around the land in the cornfields and stuff? And it's kind of, it's weird because nobody really wants to talk about it. It's kind of like I think I witnessed that, but I'm going to put that in the back of my head. I'm not going to think about it again.
Well, and I think a lot of it is that generation, too, like to talk about ghosts and things like that is just, as they say, hogwash, So
exactly. And then even for telling this story, I haven't told a ton of people about this, and I finally started feeling comfortable telling friends about it, just a handful of years ago, because it's like, oh, you don't know how anybody is going to take that. And then you're like, I get it if you think I'm nuts now, but, it's like, you definitely know what you witnessed to. So, yeah, kind of one of those in the one hand, I'll feel. But so kind of going back to how my dad is as a person, he is basically that way too. And when I've been on the land with him growing up, and we weren't even there that much, and I only spent the night twice. Once was in the camper with my step grandpa and my grandma, and then the last time was in the tent with my dad. But my dad likes to just kind of mutter to himself on the land, and you are like, what did you say? And he's like, oh, nothing. I was just talking to myself. And you're like, okay, you don't usually do that, so that's weird. And then come to find out later, when he feels a little more comfortable about it, he's just like, oh, I'm just talking to them, I'm just letting them know what we're doing and that we're not disrespecting anything. And I'm like, oh, the first time you hear that, you're like, who is them?
Who are they?
So it kind of, after, he slowly said, okay, I'm talking to them. And then he said, you'll know if you're accepted or not. And you're like, okay, I feel really cool about you saying that. So, and he would tell us, there are certain signs to know if you are welcome on the land or not. And the first time that I had a sign was I heard songbirds in the middle of the night. And that was the last time I was there. Other people will hear or see things. And most of the time, if they're not welcome, they know immediately when they come onto the land, they don't feel good and they feel really uneasy. And they feel like they're being watched all the time. And that's day or night. So most of the time, though, people are fine. And we've noticed, or at least my dad mostly, because he's out there more, he notices that people that really don't believe in things are the ones that have the most experience.
Oh, really? See, I would have thought it would be like the opposite.
Other way around.
Yeah, because most skeptics never have anything happen. And I'm just like,
right.
That's interesting. That's really interesting. So whatever it is they want to be known, they want, that's really interesting.
Yeah. The first, and that, I think that's why when I tell you about my experience, I'm pretty sure that that's why all of that happened that night, because that was my stepsister's first time out there, and she didn't really believe in that stuff, and she was kind of making jokes about it. And I think that was kind of one of the reasons why. Because when my dad first took my stepmom out there, he said, look, we're going to take a walk around the woods, and I just want you to know there's some really strange stuff that happens out here. And the light that they had on went out when he said that and came back on. I'm like, that's a little too in real time reaction for me.
And she was like, what am I getting myself into?
Yeah. She's like, oh no. So kind of going into then what I experienced. When I was a kid and I stayed there in the camper for the first time, I didn't really have anything happen to me. It wasn't until I was in high school and we went on that trip it was my dad, my stepmom, my stepsister, and my brother and I. And we shoved all of our stuff and slept in one big tent. And it was, I won't ever stay on the land again, but yeah, camping sometimes still is a little much for me because you never. But
I need that glamping lifestyle, and I'm in Oregon. Yeah. I'm like, we need a camper. We need some AC up in here.
Yeah. Exactly. And I mean, you know what? A tent can be cool, but yeah, no, you realize really quick if something is going on, you only have a vinyl sheet. It's like
you have nothing protecting you. Nothing. It's an illusion.
Yeah, exactly. There is no protection here. So yeah, my dad just decided that, we were going to go during a weekend and we were going to spend the night there, and, we were going to, just grill over the fire and have a couple drinks and, just hang out and then go to bed. And nothing extravagant. We were going to leave in the afternoon the next day anyway. It wasn't anything big, but my dad just wanted my stepsister to experience it. So we get out there and my dad's just, he's doing the muttering thing to himself. And my stepsister is like, you're just, you're trying to scare me. Like you're trying to play this up and there's going to be a prank later, I'm sure. And we kind of left things a mess. Like we had a bag for all of our garbage and stuff on one side that we were going to take with us, but we left it out overnight because we were going to clean the rest up in the morning. And my dad and my stepmom, they said, why don't you kids go and get ready for bed and get all settled, and we're just going to take a quick walk and then we'll come back. So we're laying in bed and my brother is basically out right away. Just he used to do that anyway. He was a big sleeper, very heavy sleeper. And my stepsister and I are just laying there talking about stuff, and all of a sudden we heard birds, and it sounded like when you wake up in the morning, just your
just
standard
happy birds. Yeah, that's alarming.
Yeah, and my stepsister's like, and I'm like, it's got to be midnight or something, and she's like, I don't think birds sing at night. And I'm like, you hear that too? So then, she's freaking out now. And my dad and my stepmom come back, and my stepsister is like, Mom, do you hear the birds? Did you hear the birds? And she's like freaking out. My stepmom is just like, calm down, go to sleep, you're fine. And then my dad said, well, that's a good sign. That means they accept you. And that did not help her go to sleep. Yeah, I mean, I was freaking out too because, you're like, you hear things about this area, and it's a little creepy, and you never know. So we're all sleeping, and I kept waking up. And I don't know if everybody else was waking up and hearing this too. I never asked. I don't know if anybody else would be that willing to talk about it. But the first time I woke up, I heard this rustling noise, and I think that's what woke me up. And then I look at the top of the tent, and the only way I can really describe it is it looks like this big mass of flies, like it like maybe the size of a softball, and it was completely quiet. It wasn't making noise, but it was just like these little black dots that were coming in and out of this circle, but it was like one thing. It freaked me out. And it made me very uneasy, but it was inside the tent on the top. And I'm like, well, I don't have my glasses on. I really hope that that's not my eyes. Just, you know, and I kind of looked around a little bit and I'm like, nope, it's still in the same spot. Okay, I'm just going to pretend I didn't actually wake up and I'm going to turn over, you know. And the second time I woke up, I heard running around the tent, like somebody was taking laps around the tent. And I looked up again at that spot, and that fly mass or whatever it was still there. I'm like, okay, I am second furthest away from the door of the tent. My dad is at the door of the tent, and I'm like, you know what? If this person runs,
just imagining you like leaping over everybody, just flying out the tent.
Right. And I'm like, if the person is on this side of the tent, how fast can I make it out? And then also, if they trip and fall into the tent, you know, I was like, I am going to try my darndest to not make any noise. And I'm going to, you know, try to go back to sleep. And I did pass out. And I woke up again. I don't know how, you know, far in between all of this was, but the next time I woke up, I heard the running around the tent. The mass was still there, but I was hearing like war drums and like jingling bells. And I remembered my dad telling me at one point, he goes, if you ever hear war drums, somebody's mad. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. You know, you brush that off your shoulder because you really don't ever think you're going to even witness anything like that. So now I'm like, okay, everyone else is asleep. And I'm hearing this, and I don't know what to do because I don't want to make any noises and really get the attention of whatever is out there. So I'm trying really hard to go back to sleep, and I do eventually go back to sleep. And when I wake up next, it's my stepsister is screaming, and she is trying to wake up my stepmom. And my brother and my dad are completely out.
That figures.
Like, really?
Where's the protection in this family?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, we need to run for it. Because I didn't know what she was talking about at first. And she's like, don't you hear that? And then I heard like this big noise. It was very loud. And I mean, creepy in a way that, you know, when I heard the rustling and the running and the drums and everything, I was still hearing like critters and frogs and bugs in the woods, your normal wood sounds. And when I heard this noise, everything was silent. No noise except that noise and my stepsister freaking out. It sounded big, and it sounded like 3 animals in one. It was like a lion roaring, an elephant trumpeting, and a horse whining all at the same time. And it was this big noise, and it was never like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it echoed like an air raid siren. And it was one big like cry, and it would stop, and then it'd be another big cry. It wasn't like a, you know, elongated tone,
like a long drawn out. So question, when you heard that sound, did you happen to feel anything like physically?
I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I didn't know, like it felt like I was having an out of body experience, because like my stepsister was screaming her head off and I didn't make a noise. I didn't move besides trying to like calm her down and stuff. Like my legs were heavy. Like if I had to run, I don't know if I could.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm with you 100% on that.
I'm like, I'm going to die. I'm going to die.
I'm that person in the horror movie that's going to die first.
Yeah, me probably too. Unless, you know, if my brother and my dad didn't wake up, I might have a chance. No, not really. Probably not. It'd still be me. But yeah, so that was happening. And finally, my stepmom woke up and she was trying to wake up my dad. And I was trying to wake up my brother. And my brother was like not waking up. And it was to the point where I was like, slapping him in the face. I'm like, you gotta wake up. You need to get out of here. Like, you need to, I can't carry you out of here. And my dad wakes up and he hears it and he's like, oh no. So I don't know why, but he turned the flashlight on in the tent. He unzipped the window so we could see out because we had everything zipped up. You couldn't see anything. It was completely black in front of you. You couldn't see anything. And my dad even flashed the light out, and it was like hitting a wall. Nothing penetrated.
That's so scary. That might have been like the scariest thing I've ever heard. Is like, I mean, everything that you said so far is terrifying, but the fact that light will not penetrate that to me is like you're looking into like another dimension just opened up and is just there.
Yeah, exactly. And the best way that I can describe where the noise was, the tent was about, I want to say, a few yards away from that picnic table, which is like right next to the fire pit. And it sounded like it was just by the picnic table. So it's like, we should have been able to see that far out. And the fact that we couldn't, the fact that there was no other noise it's still really hard to wrap your head around. And my dad shined the light out there and he said, I told you that we were going to clean up in the morning. I promise that I won't leave this place a mess. I respect the land. And I promise you that when we leave in the morning, we will take everything with us and we will make sure that this place was how we left it. And he said that while that noise is happening, and my stepsister's like, ah! And all of a sudden, the noise that was over by the picnic table was right next to the tent, like right where the window is, in less than a second. And it was that noise again. And my dad repeated himself, and then you heard like this huffing noise, and then it stomped off. You could hear like 3 footsteps into the woods, and that was it. The rest of the night, you didn't hear anything, no bugs or anything. It was that dead silence.
I wish you could see my face this whole time. I'm just like,
I wish I could.
I'm just shaking my head. I'm like, nope. Yeah.
And I mean, in the moment, because, I always thought if something were to ever happen to me, I feel like I would be the one that would be freaking out. And, and the fact that I wasn't, and I was just kind of like, the whole time, it was just like, what in that just happened? And my dad was just like, all right, well, nobody leaves the tent tonight. I hope you have a good night's sleep. We're just like, I'm not sleeping after that. We left early the next day. We didn't stay till the afternoon. My stepsister did not want to. My brother, he never woke up that whole time.
Is he skeptical? Is he someone that's like, whatever?
He is. And it's very interesting because what I found out was from him. So at the time this initial experience happened, he was, I want to say, like 10. He was very young. So once he was old enough to go hunting, when my dad took him out, the first time he went hunting, he saw something. He was really close to where the mound was. And I heard about this. He told me this in confidence, right after he came back from hunting, but then he never said anything else to me. So, he's not one to really talk about this. And what he saw, which I thought was very interesting, was it, and again, it didn't make any noise, but he said that it was this huge white stag. that the eyes were completely whited out too, like really milky. And he said that the rack on this thing should not have been able to be on the body, because he said even though the stag was huge, the rack on it physically would have been weighing
like
the
it
head
would have
down.
fallen over. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was, he said that even though the eyes were whited out, he said he knew that it was looking at him. And he, you know, he didn't know what to do. And he's like, that just doesn't seem right. So he got up from his spot and he went to go find my dad. Well, when he got a certain way, he's like, was this thing following me or what? So he turned around, and where it was completely gone. He didn't know where it went. There was noise. I don't know how many times that has happened to him. As far as I know, he's only seen it the once. And what I found very creepy, what I found really, really creepy was a couple years ago, for Halloween, he came over and I had a big party at my apartment, and you know, we're all sitting around drinking and telling scary stories and stuff. And I started talking about the land, and he's like, I don't want to really talk about this. And I'm like, oh, come on, Jake. Like, we've experienced things, and it's okay. You're in good company. And after he had a couple, he admitted that right after he started hunting, my dad took him up to the land, and he's like, well, if you want to fully be accepted here, you have to go across the mound in the dark, no flashlight, by yourself. And he's like, I want you to tell me what you see when you come back. And my brother's like, what the, well, he did it. And he saw this weird thing in the woods just past the mound, and which I've never been back that far, and not a lot of people have. And my dad told him, yes, you've seen this thing, and you do not go past a certain tree line away from this thing. Don't ever go over there, because if you cross that boundary, you're screwed. Well, I didn't hear about this until just a couple of years ago, but my brother said that he went there after the fact during the day, and there is a cave back there. And my dad told my brother that the thing that is out there lives in that cave.
How does your dad know this? Has he talked about, like, has he gone in there to look? Or, I mean, he knows it's there, so he has a reason to know that it's there.
Yeah. All I know is when my dad was a teenager, he at night went over the mound. I don't know if it was to go take a leak or something or what, but he didn't have a flashlight or anything, and he saw something over there. So he's like, I'm going to go investigate that during the day. Well, he said that he found this cave. I don't know anything else. Jake was the one that told me about that. Dad has never said anything about me about that. So I have no idea if he went in there or what, or if that's why he doesn't mind going out there now, if that's why he knows, like, oh, I need to kind of be like, I'm narrating what we're doing out here, so that we're not disrespecting anything. I have no idea. But when my brother told me that freaked me out so bad.
Did he say like what it was that he saw? Did he describe it? No. Oh man, you got to get him to talk.
I know, I'm like, have a couple more.
Yeah.
He's telling me, but yeah, my brother, he definitely does not like talking about it. And I'm surprised that he told me that. I had no idea up until a couple of years ago that was even a thing. I wish I knew, because the whole thing is just, it's always intrigued me. You heard the radio story growing up. My dad would say, oh, I've seen a couple things cross the road, but that was really it. And until I experienced that in high school, I didn't know anything else. And then since he's like, well, you kind of already experienced something was mad. And he kind of went in a little bit more about the shadow people and stuff. But yeah, my brother was the one that told me about the cave. And I need to know more.
I need to know more too. Can we bring him on the show?
Yeah. If I could coax him into it.
So there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff going on at this property. It's not just one thing. It's a lot of things.
Yeah.
It seems like it's connected to the land, right? It's 100% connected to the land.
Yeah, definitely. And everything happens in a certain proximity too. And it's just really weird. And I mean, my aunt saw that ant-shaped thing in the cornfield. If my dad has seen something run across the road from the forest land area, it's into that cornfield. So it makes you wonder if the farmers that are around that area have seen things, if they have their own mounds or artifacts of some sort on their property. It baffles me still. And even doing research.
Are there are there people in that area that like that are around your age, maybe that maybe like kids that grow up in that area that you could talk to, be more open?
Right. No, unfortunately. The farmers, both of their families, I think their youngest kids are my dad's age. So the farmers are really all of my grandpa's age, or my step-grandpa's age. And
nobody's talking. Is what you're saying.
No. Yeah, no one. So it's just like you find stuff online sometimes and you're like, I wonder, and I've, in recent years, that Skinwalker Ranch show came out, and I was pretty intrigued by that because, a Skinwalker, maybe,
that's like a direct connection to Native Americans too.
Yeah. Exactly.
So that makes sense.
Yeah. And
that's creepy.
It is creepy. I wish I had more answers.
Would you ever let someone, or would your dad ever let someone come to the property to like investigate, or would there be like a liability issue involved with that? What if they were like, I'll sign a waiver that says no harm, no foul?
Right. Well, we have talked about that. And I know when I was talking with Nick and Jake too, they had the same question. And I did kind of talk to my dad about it. It's kind of a touchy subject, especially for people that, don't really know the family or anything. They're worried that, we're going to get a bad rep. And because my step grandpa still owns it, I can talk to my dad and my dad can ask my step grandpa, but usually they're not really comfortable with people coming out with equipment or anything like that. I know that, it would be awesome if we could get people out there, but I honestly would not go unless my dad was there, because
he's the mediator. It seems like he's the one that can. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I know that he knows way more than he lets on. So if he's uncomfortable with having people come out there, I don't know, like, could we spend the night? How much time could we have out there? What would be allowed for equipment to record or document things? I honestly, though, would love to know more and have somebody else.
Well, if you ever get permission, let me know. I will book a flight.
Definitely. I know that my step grandpa's getting older, of course, and he was thinking about passing it along to one of my step uncles, and my step uncle was talking about potentially building a house out there, and I'm like,
no,
why?
Don't do
Why
it.
would you? No.
And he has to know, right? He has to know that it's like
during that party. So it's just like,
that makes zero sense.
Yeah, exactly. And he's married and has kids, and no way.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to add, or you want to, like, I don't know, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on that location? Do you think it's obviously there's a mound there. There's a spiritual connection, probably Native American.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that probably a lot of those places probably do harbor a lot of negativity because those people were forced off their lands,
Exactly. And
so,
it's interesting with how my dad is like, we need to respect the land, and it makes you wonder like you said, what happened, and if they're trying to get a feel for people that go on the land right away, they're clearly not very trusting of what people are going to do that they don't know.
Well,
so
and let's face it, we're white people. So
yeah,
there's that.
Yeah, exactly. There's already a distrust with, and obviously I think my dad is right about making comments of, if you're disrespectful, you're going to really hear about it. Well, I mean, look what happened. That first story that I heard where they were partying with loud noises and a bunch of cans and garbage all over the place. And, if it's my woods, I'd be mad.
Yeah. No
Oh,
doubt.
yeah. Just really interesting. And to have something or multiple things at once, and that's another thing, is it all connected? Is it one entity that's able to do all of this stuff? Shadow people, creature running across the road, the creature that was in the crops, whatever the heck was making that noise. That's the other thing I have a lot of questions about. What was that was making the noise? Was it the thing that was running across the road? Was it the thing my aunt saw in the cornfield? Or was it something different? I mean, I wish I knew. I don't necessarily know if I would have wanted to see it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty glad I didn't, because the noise was definitely scary.
I don't know how people function normally in society when they have experiences like that. I mean, you hear, and I'm sure there's a certain number of people that report stuff that didn't really happen. But I mean, for me, I had my own experience. So I don't think I'm crazy. I mean, people that I know might think I'm a little bit crazy, but it wasn't just me. There were other people. So it's not like, that it was just a mass hallucination, whatever it was, it happened.
Exactly. And I mean, I can completely understand for people who had a singular witness. It was just them. And they could have said, you know what? I was really tired. Maybe I had too much caffeine. You don't know. It's just, but when you have multiple people with you and that is happening and everybody is reacting differently at the same time, it's like, okay, how can I really say this did not happen? How can I say that I was just dreaming when we talked about it the next day? Everybody wanted to get the heck out of there. I mean, yeah, it's really hard to say nothing happened when it was multiple people.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd love to go there sometime.
Yeah. Well, if you are welcome to come out and we'll get Nick and Jake out there too.
Yeah, I definitely would feel like I would need some protection and your dad would have to be there for sure.
Oh yeah. I say that for definitely my dad has to be there and we would have to have a bigger group of people. And I'm going to just say no freaking tents. No more tents. We're camping it in a camper.
I was going to say, either that or how long could you sit out in a lawn chair by the fire? How long can you stay awake and just sit there the whole night?
That would be nice.
That would be terrifying.
It would, especially since based on where the fire ring is and the picnic table, the mound is right there.
Oh man, it'd be interesting. You said that opening in the mound is pretty small. If you could, say in inches, circumference, what are you talking about size wise?
Honestly, that opening at most is probably 2 inches or so, not even. You can't even really get a hand in there.
So what if you had one of those small cameras that they put down into pipes?
Oh, that would be cool, because then we would actually
because I mean they do that. Plumbers have those, right? They go through the pipes and then you could at least see maybe what it was that you were looking at. And then if there's someone who studies, obviously, what do you call them? Petroglyphs and all of that. Maybe someone could tell you something about it.
I would love that, because just to really make out what was on, I mean, clearly there are drawings and it's depictions of things, but you cannot really make it out. And honestly, I think if the sun wasn't out at that point in the day when we were out there, I really don't even know if we would have noticed that there was an opening. So that's also kind of weird, because you're like, oh, you know, why is it also, you know, the other question I had, when you think of mounds, and if it's a burial mound, you would think, oh, well, wouldn't there be more of a layer of soil and grass all over?
Yeah.
You know, is it this almost like a sandstone, limestone type, you know, even there, you know, that still is something that I'm like, I don't understand that, but I'm trying to think of how I can reference how big it is. It's definitely long, and it's pretty tall, but I would say the mound is a little bit longer than a school bus.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's big.
And yeah. And you know that it's a mound right away, because it is that perfect shape. But for height, it's definitely taller than a school bus, but like a school bus and a half, probably in height, is how I'm trying to.
That's huge.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
You have to get out there and just take a picture of it. Just see what happens if you take a picture of it. Maybe something will show up.
I would freak out.
Not like, in your house, just on camera, just on the picture.
Yeah, right? Especially just take a couple quick and not even look and then run away. You know, I'm not even going to. But yeah, something to at least document and take pictures of the areas where people have seen things happen or witness things too.
You should definitely do that. You should definitely do that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're ready. I have a story for you. So it's interesting the story you were saying, your dad, about the dog, because I have a similar story. And you may or may not know this, but I grew up in southeastern Indiana. And so really close to the border of Ohio and Kentucky. And actually just did some research today. And it turns out that it was the Shawnee that were in that area from like the early 1700s. And then at one point they were forced out, and then they came back around like the 1760s. So the area that I lived in, very rural, go figure. The town that I grew up in was about 1,600 people, and I lived outside of town. So totally just farm area. And then back behind our property, just across the road, you go out a little bit further and there's just a giant cliff that drops down to Lothry Creek. And so Lothry Creek is like a pretty large, lengthy creek. Like you can take canoes down it and kind of go, like it stretches across a big part of that area. So I know that would have been like an air, would have been a good spot for people to kind of settle. So the land that we lived on, the main part of the yard was probably only like a quarter of an acre. And this would have been back behind the house. I was a sophomore in high school. And it was the first time that my boyfriend had ever come out to the property, which is also interesting. And we'll get into that in a minute. But my girlfriend was with me, and we were all just sitting in the backyard. It would have been probably like early fall, and not too long after the school day had ended. So quite a bit of light still outside. And sitting on this porch swing that sits out in the yard. And where the yard ends, like I said, it's a very short section of yard, and then it connects to this big giant field. And the field probably goes back like 2 acres. And then there's another field that connects on the left-hand side and another field that connects on the right-hand side. At the very back of the field, there's a tree line, but it's a pretty good distance. Everything else is pretty well open. So we're just sitting there, shooting the shit like teenagers do. And then all of a sudden, I don't know why, but something just like, how you just get a feeling and your eyes are drawn to a certain area. But we all turned at the same time. And right at the edge of the yard, if I had a good throwing arm, I could have hit what we saw with a rock. That's how close it was. It was probably maybe only like 30 to 50 feet from us. This giant black dog with long, shaggy hair, probably maybe like 6 inches in length, this hair all over it, blacker than black, literally just appeared out of nowhere. We didn't see it run up. Like you could have seen it run up. Granted, we were talking to each other, but like we would have heard it. We would have seen something. And it was just standing there staring at us. And of course, the back of this thing was probably like 4 feet tall, the back. And then giant head. And it was just looking at us in this way that it was almost like, what are you doing here? Like a curiosity, like it was kind of like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? You know what I mean? But like, obviously it scared me to death. It scared everybody else to death. My friend and I were just frozen. We couldn't move. Yeah. The boyfriend at the time, he was like a track athlete, he did all the sports. He jumped up on the back of the porch swing, like was standing. You know how there's like a back that you can put your arms on and kind of like let rest? My hand was there. He was standing on top of my hand and like trapped me. So not a good sign, ladies. It's
no,
not a good sign. So, we're just kind of all looking at each other, like doing the head twists, like trying to figure out what is going on. And then we look back down there, or I do, and whatever this thing is, it wasn't making any sound. It didn't move like an animal, like it did this really weird thing. And this is what sticks out in my mind that makes it so crazy. Have you ever watched like a horror movie where you see things like do that really jerky, like twitchy, like like that? That's what it did. Yeah. And then it vanished. It didn't run off. Like it just literally just disappeared.
Was it on all fours when it was doing that?
It was on all fours. Yeah. It never stood up. Like, you hear dogmen, they like it. But I've heard people say that dogmen, like they'll start on fours and then you'll hear like their bones crack and they'll pop up on 2. But this was just on all fours the whole time. Yeah.
Weird. And so when you said it was jerking, were the legs jerking, or was it?
It was it was literally like its whole body glitched. Like, if you could see me, you could see me do the motions. Imagine like the robot, like it was like boom, boom, boom. It just like glitched really weird, and then it just was gone.
Oh, that is weird.
Yeah. But that's not the only thing that happened on that property. And I think the reason, with that type of a creature, my mom and my stepdad, we had horses on the property. And so they were always like doing stuff in the horse pens and out in the field. And they actually uncovered a full like stone axe head that was like hand carved, found one of those like grinding like mortar and pestles on the property, all kinds of arrowheads and stuff like that. And we never really dug up anything or like tried to explore. And that was just stuff that they found when they were doing like their yard work and all that.
Right. And
so I think probably maybe it was somewhat connected to that, but I don't know. And then the other really strange things that happened on the property when we first moved in, um, my mom and my stepdad had just gotten married, and we moved to this property, and I had never really been out there. I was like in junior high when we moved there. And I was sitting at the table with my mom, kind of looking out. The house that we lived in, there was an old house that was next to us. And then my stepdad's mom lived in the house next to that. So it was like us, the old house, and her, but all very close together. And so I'm sitting at the kitchen table and I'm looking out at the old house, and she's like sitting right next to me. And I'm like, Mom, there's some guy out there. And she's like, what are you talking about? And I said, there's some guy. He's standing at the corner of the house. He's like looking down at us. And of course, she looks out there. And by the time she looks out there, there's nobody there. And she goes, well, what did he look like? And I was like, oh, he was, he had like really white hair. He was wearing a white t-shirt and a pair of bib overalls. And she just kind of like shook her head and she goes, that was Ray. And I was like, who's Ray? And the reason we moved there is because my stepdad's stepdad had just passed away. And that was his mom's husband. And we had just moved there. And this was like not too long after he died. And I had never met him before. And I guess he used to like tinker in that house. Like that was where he would go and do like, he had like a little TV upstairs that he'd watch baseball games and, do woodworking stuff. And so, I mean, to me, that's like he was probably just checking in on us type of thing.
Yeah.
I never saw him again or had any other experiences. So that one wasn't like the worst of them. But the other thing that happened very regularly was we would get knocks on the front and back door, like in like series of threes. It'd always be like, I don't know if you can hear that, but just like knock, knock, knock. And we had dogs and our driveway was really long. It was gravel. We lived on a gravel road. So you can hear cars, coming for what seems like forever. And our dogs would lose their shit anytime they heard anything. And they never heard anything like leading up to it, but then they would just like go crazy. And then like less than a minute, it would happen on the other door. And I would like throw the curtains back and there was never anybody there. Never. And that happened for years. And then my mom, I think before she moved out, because they ended up getting divorced, she said that there were multiple times in the middle of the night where she had woken up and there was like this white mist, like that was moving and like it was hovering over the bed and it would like and she just laughs. She just thinks it's hilarious. She doesn't get scared by that stuff at all. And I'm just like, I would have
lucky.
I just no, thank you. Like the knocks were terrifying because there was never anybody there. And the fact that it was in threes, I don't know,
yeah,
just really, really creepy. It was always the same rhythm. Yeah. My stepsister was younger than me. And I remember I was sitting by the one door and then she was sitting on the opposite side and we heard it. She goes, did you just do that? And I'm like, you're looking at me. I'm sitting in the recliner, like with my hands in my lap. No, I didn't do it. Yeah.
Oh, were they, so was it just like a normal knock or a pounding?
It was just like knock, 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 like not super loud, but like sounded like somebody was knocking on the door,
Yeah.
And nobody was ever there.
Oh my gosh. So when you would get that on one side of the house, would it always follow up on the other side? Yes. Or would you just
Yes. It was always in sets like that. It would start at the front door, the door that we would enter, and then the back door was like the one that faced the field.
Yeah, so, you definitely know. It's like the house isn't shifting. This is definitely not right.
No, it was a mobile home. So, it's like a newer, like modular. And I don't even think we had the porch on the back at that point. But Yeah. And I mean, and to give you like some background, my mom and stepdad were like majorly homebodies. Like we never had people come over, like family didn't even come over. It was like nobody came to visit. So
Yeah.
there was nobody that we knew that was knocking on the door.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. Once the old house in between us was torn down, my mom said that a lot of that, because I had moved out, obviously, went to college and all that, it was still going on until that house was torn down. And then she said the knocks stopped, but the mist was still happening. So I don't know.
Weird.
And I don't have access to the property anymore, so I can't
really
go
go
out
and check it out.
No.
That's especially, when you have an experience and you're like, okay, I remember where this happened. Will I see this again? It's almost like just a confirmation of like, yep, that's a thing.
Yeah, I'm glad, honestly, that the other people that were with me saw the dog too. And I don't think my friend ever came back to the house after that. I don't think she ever came back. That was it.
Oh.
So I don't know.
blame her. I'd be like,
I'm curious. I'm curious. The thing that your dad saw, like, did it seem friendly? Was it kind of just like oblivious to him being there? Did it interact with him?
As far as what it sounds like, it definitely knew my dad was there. It was just like if a dog came up and was like, hey, human, I'm going to follow you for a little bit. But nothing where my dad didn't pet it. It stayed a couple feet away from my dad at all times, and it was always behind him. And I don't know how far he walked before he realized that it wasn't there anymore. And for size wise, all he said was it was larger than a large breed dog, but he didn't say, how tall in feet or how long at all. But I would be really curious to see, clearly it was following him and interacting with him, but he just saw it the one time. I am curious. So, okay. The dog that you saw, the hair, you said it was like 6 inches long. Was it just in the front and was it shorter in the back, or was it hair all over that was that long?
I think like mostly it was like the head and the body, but then probably the legs. That would have been shorter, like the legs and the feet. I just remember like the head and the body, it just seemed really long.
That sounds like what you hear people describe a hellhound look, how they look.
That's kind of what I wondered too, because I'm like, I told my mom about this story before, and when it first happened, like you try to wrap your brain around what it is, and then years later I'm like, maybe it was trying to warn me, because my ex was like, he had some stuff that followed him. So when we like, since he was 5 years old, he told me a story of when he lived in Florida, and his sister and him used to share a room, and they had bunk beds, and they had gone out during the day and gotten like a coloring book and new crayons. And he said at night he woke up, he was on the top bunk and she was on the bottom bunk asleep, but she was like a mimic of her was floating facing him on his bed and was holding the crayons and the coloring book and had like these glowing red eyes, or maybe it was white. I remember he said that it might have been white eyes. And he looked down and his sister was asleep down there. And then he said the next day he went to try to find the coloring book and crayons and they were gone. And then shadow figures. I saw shadow figures when I was with him multiple times. And then when his dad moved into this one old creepy house, I kid you not, the first time I stepped into that house, I knew the house. Like I had that feeling like I've been here before. Like that was creepy. And the house was just really, really freaking creepy. And
Oh,
his parents had like split up and were trying to like they were dealing with the separation, but they would still see each other. So he would go to like where his mom was, and my boyfriend and I would stay in the house by ourselves. And we were upstairs sleeping one night, and we heard his sister call us from downstairs. And she was in Ohio visiting her boyfriend. Yes. So whatever it was mimicking her voice, calling us to come downstairs. And that house like had all kinds of craziness. So I've often wondered if like the dog was like almost like a warning or some sort of like a bad omen, because he had stuff that
right.
followed him forever. And even when we were married years later, I tend to go to bed very early because I'm an early bird and I get tired. So
Me too.
I was sleeping upstairs, and oh gosh, it must have been like maybe like around 1 a.m. I hear thump, 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 thump. And then the door to the bedroom just flies open, and he just jumps onto the bed, and he's like, and of course I'm freaking out. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And he's like, I was sitting on the couch downstairs, and he said, I got this feeling like something was watching me. And the way the living room was set up, there was basically like a wall. The couch was up against the wall, and then there was a doorway, and the doorway led back to the dining room, which is open. And then on the other side of the dining room, there was another doorway, which led to the kitchen. And he said that the black figure was standing in the doorway in the kitchen. And he was so scared that like he couldn't move. And he was just like, I'm going to just wait it out, just like see if it goes away. And he sat there for a little while. And then he looked again. It was closer. It had moved closer. And so eventually he just like got the courage to just haul ass up the stairs. Yeah. So
Oh my God.
Indiana is weird.
Something about the Midwest. I don't know. It's just
I don't know. I would like to know why it is such a hotbed for all the weird stuff that seems to happen.
Yeah. Exactly. There is a lot of weird.
A lot of weird. Yeah, but I mean, now that like, I'm not in that relationship, haven't been in that relationship for a really long time. I've never had any experiences since.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. It didn't rub off on you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I can't even imagine. And then it would be really interesting because and you had experienced the thing with his sister's voice, and he saw his sister like an apparition mimic of her. It makes you wonder, like, did she have things going on with her too?
I don't know. I mean, she and I were like best friends in high school, and she never really, I don't ever remember her telling me anything about any experiences, but she was also, I think, pretty religious. And I don't know if that makes a difference, but yeah, she never really mentioned like having any issues. And they were the type of family like they always had people over, you know what I mean? So, and it was the two of them. And then one of his name was Josh, one of his friends at the time stayed with them, kind of lived with them. And there were just, the house was always full of teenagers, and other people that were visiting had the same experiences when they were around him. So whatever it was seemed to be attached to him specifically.
That is really weird. I feel bad for people that have that, because it's what do you do? You're like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. One experience is enough.
Yeah.
I don't seeing things or hearing things
Yeah, and I mean, there's a darker history that I won't get into, but I think knowing that some of that I sort of get it now. Like some of that, I think, I don't know, when people have trauma and stuff like that, I feel like for whatever reason, it like makes you a magnet for this stuff. So,
yeah. And I know I thought it was really interesting too when we were kind of comparing things that, my family has witnessed, I've witnessed, and then you've witnessed. And it's really interesting to really kind of correlate ages, because it seems like being in that teenage time frame of your life, that really seems to be when, hormones and energy and stuff, is that a big factor in this stuff, because I have friends that have had experiences, and it seems like it's always when you're in that age gap,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's just weird.
Yeah, I'd like to know what it is too. Well, and then you hear like little kids often can see things that other people can't see. Definitely teenagers. And I think a lot of like poltergeist activity a lot of times centers around teenagers.
Yep. Just so weird.
Yeah, I hope that I never really have to experience anything like that the rest of my life. I think I'm good. I think I've hit my quota.
Me too. I mean, I was never really a skeptic, but when you don't experience something, it's really, you can think it's cool all day long, you can be interested in it, but once you actually have an experience and you're like, oh, I get it now, and you're like, I'm good, I'll watch this stuff, but it's better on a TV screen and not in my life.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. It was a pleasure meeting you. And next time, Heidi, I will fix the camera situation so we can actually see each other and it won't be so awkward.
Sounds good. Well, it was awesome to meet you. We still met, and I do appreciate it. I thank you very much, Heidi.
Thank you, Blair, for keeping it screepy on this episode of Weird Wilderness. You have truly brought the weird to this episode. If you have a weird wilderness story you'd like to share, send an email to heidi@weirdwilderness.com. And as always, stay safe out there. It gets pretty weird in the weird wilderness.